Welcome to this explainer. What would you do if a judge genuinely believed your spirit, your literal ghost, was out attacking people while your physical body was sitting right there in the courtroom? It sounds completely insane, right? Well, today, we're exploring the real-world legal nightmare where the justice system went blind to objective reality, allowing invisible apparitions to send innocent people to the gallows. We're looking at how a bizarre legal doctrine turned the Puritan village of Salem into a deadly courtroom thriller.
So let's dive right into this impossible question. It's a question that ultimately sealed the fate of 20 innocent people in colonial America. Think about it for a second. If someone accuses you of a crime today, you can usually provide an alibi. But if they accuse your specter, your invisible spirit, of committing a crime while your physical body is miles away, fast asleep in bed, how on earth do you defend yourself against that? The terrifying truth is, you can't. And that inescapable logical loop is exactly what destroyed an entire community.
To understand how things went so wrong, picture this. It's the dead of winter, 1692, in the claustrophobic parsonage of Reverend Samuel Parris. Salem Village was a harsh place, poisoned by biting wind, gnawing hunger, and simmering resentments. For the Puritans, everyday life was just a grim struggle against the unforgiving land. And to them, the vast, dark wilderness right outside their walls was, quite literally, Satan's domain. The devil's work was seen in absolutely everything. A failed crop, a sick cow, a sudden illness. Fear was constantly simmering right below the surface.
Well, by February, all that tension finally snapped. Inside the Reverend's home, 9-year-old Betty Parris and her 11-year-old cousin Abigail Williams started exhibiting bizarre, downright terrifying behavior. They were hiding, barking like dogs, and contorting their bodies into these impossible shapes. They screamed as if they were being pinched and choked by invisible tormentors. With no physical ailments to point to, the local doctor, William Griggs, delivered a diagnosis that was essentially a death sentence for the town. He declared, "The evil hand is on them." Just like that, witchcraft was officially loose in Salem.
Now, what's absolutely crucial to understand here is the legal loophole that let this madness spread like wildfire. It was a concept known as spectral evidence. This basically meant that if a victim claimed an accused person's spirit appeared to them in a vision to inflict harm, the court accepted it. It created an invisible weapon that no defense attorney could ever cross-examine. The theological logic was that the devil couldn't use a person's shape without their permission, so if a girl said your specter was attacking her, the court took it as hard proof you were working with Satan. You can see how this creates a completely inescapable legal trap. Sure, the court sometimes looked for tangible physical stuff, forbidden books, puppets, or supposed witches' teats on the body, but those weren't incredibly rare. Instead, actual physical proof was entirely sidelined in favor of agonizing, unprovable courtroom performances, silent screams, invisible bites. The line between religious paranoia and actual judicial process completely dissolved.
Okay, so this smoldering local suspicion, it turns into a raging inferno when the first arrests happen. One of the very first accused was Tituba, an enslaved woman in the Parris household. After being interrogated and beaten by the Reverend, Tituba didn't just confess. She wove this spectacular, terrifying narrative. She testified about meeting the devil as a man in black, seeing a great yellow bird, and most frighteningly, a book with other local names in it. That single confession changed everything. It meant there wasn't just one isolated witch. There was a coordinated coven hiding in plain sight. What started out as a localized panic in February escalated terrifyingly fast into a systemic, government-sanctioned judicial machine hungry for convictions. By March, official examinations began, and by May, the jails were literally overflowing. When Governor William Phips arrived from England, he established a special court of Oyer and Terminer specifically to handle these cases, spearheaded by the unyielding Chief Justice William Stockton. The state was now officially weaponizing the hysteria. And the way this court operated was just a theater of the absurd. Imagine this. You, an accused neighbor, walk into a packed Salem meeting house. Immediately, the accusers, sitting in the front row, start writhing on the floor, screaming that your invisible specter is biting and pinching them right then and there. Magistrates like John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin systematically accepted these frantic, invisible attacks as undeniable legal fact. They treated the girl's visible agony as irrefutable proof of your invisible guilt. The true horror of this system was cemented with the trial of Rebecca Nurse. She was 71 years old, famous for her charity, honestly, by all accounts, a living saint. Dozens of neighbors even signed a petition defending her, and the jury initially found her not guilty.
But when the verdict was read, the accusers went into violent fits. Chief Magistrate Stoughton relentlessly pressured the jury until they actually reversed their verdict. If a universally respected grandmother couldn't be saved by her lifelong pious reputation, the message was clear: absolutely no one was safe. And if you can believe it, the court even introduced pseudoscience to validate these spectral claims. Enter the touch test. The theory was that a witch cast invisible malefic vonae into a victim through their eyes. So during a fit, they would blindfold the accused and force them to touch the convulsing victim. If the fit miraculously stopped, observers believed the venom had returned to the witch's body by sympathy. It's wild to think about, but a simple physical touch was twisted into absolute proof of demonic guilt. Now you might be wondering, didn't anyone try to stop this? Well, yes. John Proctor, a pragmatic farmer, openly called the proceedings a complete fraud. But that skepticism made him a massive target. His servant, Mary Warren, actually tried to expose the lies under oath. But the moment she did, the other accusers unleashed a devastating psychological assault right there in the courtroom. They mimicked her every move, screaming that her specter was tormenting them. The poor girl was so terrified, she psychologically broke, rejoined the accusers, and condemned John Proctor to the gallows. The executions themselves were brutal and highly public. Moments before her hanging, a defiant beggar named Sarah Good was urged by Reverend Nicholas Noyes to confess. She wasn't having it. She delivered this chilling curse: "I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink." And in a crazy historical twist, years later, Reverend Noyes would literally die of a sudden, massive hemorrhage, choking on a rush of his own blood. But cracks in this mass hysteria finally started to show, particularly during the execution of a former minister, George Burroughs. While standing on the gallows, he flawlessly recited the Lord's Prayer from start to finish. Now, according to Puritan lore, a witch was physically incapable of doing that. The crowd got restless, suddenly realizing they were watching an innocent man die. But the highly influential minister Cotton Mather, watching from his horse, stepped in. He argued that the devil can appear as an angel of light and made sure the execution proceeded. Honestly, perhaps the most profound act of defiance came from 81-year-old Giles Corey. He knew the court was a total sham, but he also knew that if he was convicted, the government would confiscate his land, leaving his sons with nothing. So he flat out refused to enter a plea. By law, refusing to plead meant enduring pain forte et dure, death by pressing. For 2 agonizing days, Corey endured heavy stones piled on his chest. Every time they demanded a plea, his only raspy response was, "More weight." He died unconvicted, saving his son's inheritance and sickening even the strongest supporters of the trials. By the autumn of 1692, 20 people were dead and over 200 were sitting in jail. But the accusers, completely drunk on this unchecked power, finally went too far. They started pointing their invisible specters at the highest, most powerful levels of colonial society, including Lady Phipps, the wife of the governor himself. The hysteria had finally hit a massive political and social brick wall. At the exact same time, the intellectual foundation of the trials totally fractured. Influential Boston ministers, led by Harvard's president Increase Mather, started publicly condemning the reliability of spectral evidence. He delivered a very powerful sermon declaring, and this is a famous line, that it is better for 10 suspected witches to escape than for 1 innocent person to be condemned. The tide of public and religious opinion was turning, and it was turning fast. So, stripped of their invisible weapon, the prosecutions completely collapsed. In October, Governor Phipps dissolved that special court. By January, a new court was set up that explicitly barred spectral evidence. Without those silent screams and invisible bites as proof, there were literally no cases left. The remaining prisoners were slowly released, leaving an entire town to grapple with a really deep, collective shame that would eventually lead to public apologies and annulments. 19 hanged, 1 pressed to death, over 200 accused and imprisoned, with several dying behind bars. Behind these grim numbers lies the catastrophic failure of a legal system, a system that validated mass delusion over objective reality. It wasn't just a religious canic, right? It was a structural breakdown where the official apparatus of the government prioritized fear over facts. As we wrap up this explainer, those ghosts of Salem remain a permanent warning etched into our history. They show us exactly what happens when due process is abandoned in the name of safety. So, ask yourself, how easily can fear overwhelm reason? And more importantly,
When panic sets in, what modern, unprovable ghosts might we be allowing into our own courtrooms today? Thanks for exploring this dark chapter with me. Keep questioning the evidence, and I'll catch you next time.